Hi everyone, welcome to week one of several weeks where we talk about fake news. Without further ado, let's get into the questions. First, what are some common ways to spot fake news? Several of the articles mentioned several different tips, but I think the Quartz video featuring Damaso Reyes really sums it up well. The first step is to ask where the information is coming from. This might be a fairly easy spot because sites whose sole purpose is to perpetuate fake news will often try to mimic the URLs of reputable news sites, but they'll be off by just a bit. For example, we know that uwf.edu is real, so a copycat might make something like uwf.com or uwf.net. If the article passes the URL test, then you'll want to think about whether the article meets the standards of quality journalism, which we'll talk about in the next few tips. The next tip is, does the headline sound neutral? Quality news sources are generally thought to be politically neutral and unbiased, though we'll get into that bit a little bit more into the next few weeks. But a really common tip that people give for spotting fake news is whether the headline sounds neutral. If it sounds biased or if it sounds outlandish, it's worth checking into the story in some detail before deciding whether it's true. You can thank the rise of clickbaity headlines for this kind of thing, but clickbaity headlines exist and continue to exist because they work. They generate a lot of clicks, likes, and shares on social media, which is what both regular and fake news sites want. Tip number 3, look and see if the story has an actual author and consider that author's reputation. A lot of times, fake news articles won't even have an author listed, which is a huge red flag. But you should also consider the reputation of the author of the article at hand and think about what their motives and goals might be for writing the story. Do they benefit in any way from stretching or twisting the truth a little bit? Tip number 4, check the sources. Reyes says it's easy to just say, scientists say this thing or that thing, but you want to make sure that a scientist did actually say that and whether the science cited is actually credible. Was it funded by some kind of special interest group that, again, has some kind of a stake in the particular piece of news? That doesn't always mean the science is unreliable, but sometimes it does. If that's what you find in your investigations, you'll need to dig a bit deeper before making your judgment. Additionally, journalism is notorious for taking actual quality scientific studies and then sort of condensing them down into little factoids that sound certain or make this claim or that claim. But once you look at the actual studies, the actual claims made by the actual scientists are much more nuanced and complex. That's partly because, again, science is complex and it's hard to distill down an entire degree's worth of knowledge into a 1,000-word Vox article. But some pieces of news are more egregious at this than others. The last piece of advice that Reyes gives is to check the image source. This will help you determine if the news is one of those it's a real picture but out of context types of fake news stories. Reverse Google image search is your friend. There are other tips too, but we'll move on to the next question for now. Okay, question number 2. What are the different types of fake news? Again, the different articles you read classify things differently, but here's the gist. Number 1, real images shared out of context for a false impression. Photoshop makes it so easy to take an image and pull it out of its original context to give some kind of false impression. Number 2, imposter websites designed to mimic trusted sources. Again, like if uwf.edu had an imposter, it might be something like uwf.net. Number 3, fake or misleading news articles. Sometimes people just make up fake news. You'll read more about why people might do this next week, but just know that sometimes a story is flat out made up, or it might be tweaked in particular ways to make it more fake than not. Number 4, visual aids sharing faux facts and quotes. Again, Photoshop makes it really easy to put together someone's random image with quotes from other random people. There was a trend a while back of pairing images of Taylor Swift with quotes from Hitler. It was unfortunate. Number 5, satire. The Onion is an obvious example, but I got fooled once by an Army-specific satire news site. The headline reeled me in, and I read half the piece in horror before realizing, oh, This is satire. Number 6. The UWF libraries classify repeat offenders of clickbaity headlines as leaning towards fake news. They know what they're doing, and they're not stopping. They're after the clicks, the likes, and the shares, not the truth. And finally, question 3. Have you ever encountered fake news in your own social media? What type of fake news was it? And how did you recognize it as fake news? This question will depend entirely upon your own experience, but know that as I'm grading these, I'm looking to see if you successfully applied the principles that you learned in the readings to your own experiences. All right, that's it. Stay tuned next week for even more discussion of fake news.